Hello, welcome back to Supporting Students with Depression. In part two, we are going to look at more student-specific approaches that can be utilized. The first thing you want to consider when reaching out to student is how to basically go about that process of checking in with the student. And you want to let them know what you've noticed and what your potential concerns are. Best to do this in a private area. Basically, explaining to them using I statements, the patterns, and just basically their presentation that you notice them, and ask them if everything's okay. The key component here is to really avoid giving any advice or trying to solve problems at this point. You're really just trying to get the student to open up. You want to listen and be supportive, and be ready to connect them and provide them with resources. That's the most important thing here. And even if they don't communicate with you, at least you're letting them know that you're someone who is available to talk to and be supportive if need to be. When reaching out to a parent, this can be a little bit of a trickier situation. If you reach out too fast, the parent may feel like or that you're singling out their child in some way. They may be defensive that their student is being overly watched, or that you're implying that they're doing something wrong. But if you approach too late, then the symptoms of depression become more ingrained and they become more difficult to remediate. It generally might take some time. So if you're going to err, it's generally to reach out early in the process here. Some tips for starting conversations with parents, or just basically explain to them what you've seen and ask them if they noticed, if they've seen anything similar in the home. Up until a point, unless it's really, really significant, but try to normalize the behavior, what you've seen, that it is common, and kind of have a game plan that you present to them of how you would like to address, the problem, and be prepared to check back with them, frequently, and let them know that you're going to be checking back with them on there, and that they're willing to contact you at any time. Now, when we think of seating, we typically think of students that are impulsive or maybe with attention problems. And in those situations, those students typically sit in the front of the room. And that may be the case with depressed students, but more times than not, there is actually a little bit of a twist on there. It is sometimes better to place them in the back of the room where they don't feel like the limelight and the spotlight is all on them. And other times, placement by inviting students and your friends will certainly help their spirits. Reducing stress. The goal here is not to overwhelm the student. This was talked about in video one. Is once a depressed student falls far behind, they're going to be more inclined to give up. And you want to prevent that from happening. So some of the things, and these are kind of old standbys in classroom management techniques, is chunking up work, modifying work, reducing the amount of writing, and where you can, adding some multiple choice. Other measures that are similar to what was discussed in the previous slide is seeing if you can schedule changes. When the student is most alive and vigorous, can you schedule the most difficult subjects during those periods? Intermittent breaks and physical breaks throughout the day, having flexible deadlines, allowing retakes, resubmissions. Here are some things that we want to do. Basically, what you're trying to do is provide some type of mental relief from the grind of academic works can produce, the high-paced nature of schooling today. Assisting with organization. When you feel overwhelmed, and this is basically everybody, sometimes you don't know where to begin, and agendas, to-do lists, daily planners, and stuff like that are a way to help a depressed student out. Connect the student to other students, other adults. This is a very important here. With difficult students, I mean, sometimes this can, might have misspoke. There were some students this can be kind of difficult, and that's understandably, but you definitely want to try to do so. here. I think the quote by Robin Williams kind of exemplifies what we're trying to accomplish here, and basically that is that people care here about you at this school, at this classroom. We miss you when you're not here, and that you're not alone. Um, when you're doing this, try to implement peer-to-peer and other type of social involvements of the depressed student strategically. And what I mean by that is you don't want to have the depressed student feel like you're taking pity on them in some fashion. Otherwise, this won't be successful, and it might have an ill effect to that matter. Great Engage, this is kind of a continuation. If nothing else, that you as an adult in the room or the primary lead educator teacher, you really can control and influence the student's relationship with you, and that matters the most. Having something to do and feeling like it matters to someone, that you have a job to do in life, or responsibility, is very important. So when you give jobs and responsibilities to depressed students, it helps them feel like they're important, or they have something to do that matters at the school. And oftentimes these types of duties go to students who not necessarily need them. So it's important to can think of the quiet kids, the kids that might be depressed, of getting those types of jobs here. The other topic here is that to really try to foster and promote a sense of pride with a student that is depressed. If you would go to them and you ask them, depressed kids that are suffering with self-esteem, what are you proud of this week? What are you proud of today? What are you proud of in your life? A lot of times they can't answer. They don't know. So they need to feel a sense of accomplishment. So take notice of their strengths, take notice of what they do, make note of them, and remind those to the students frequently. Effort trumps output and outcomes here. And if you're familiar with the growth mindset material that's been out for a while now, that you know this concept well. But however, it is sometimes easy to miss when we're kind of caught up in the daily grind of educating students. There was one example student that I worked with as a behavior consultant for a school district. His name was Brandon. He was depressed, didn't complete a lot of work. One day there seemed to be a change where he had a little more energy and wrote down all assignments. He took his book home. He had the best intentions of completing work, but his sister accidentally took his book home and went with her grandmother, so he didn't have a book. He didn't have necessary materials to do that homework that night. And when he got back to school, it was kind of same old, and he kind of got penalized for not having his work completed. And in short, the teacher kind of missed the effort that was put out, and it was because they wasn't really looking at it closely. So don't forget to do that, and notice the effort that kids are putting forth, especially depressed students. It certainly will mean a lot, because it takes a lot of motivation to get them going to begin with. Reinforcement. One thing to consider here, that if it's going to be just general praise, a lot of times that superficial type of reinforcement is not going to be really sufficient enough to what depressed students are really looking for. It needs to be just a little bit more higher value, and some of the things that really are higher value reinforcers here. Removal of non-prof activities, asking for opinions, sharing positive emotion, even just talking to, complimenting them on something unexpected that they don't notice, small victories that they have in life. These are often more higher value than just general praise. So something to consider. Okay, so this concludes section 2. In the next video, we are going to review some things and some strategies, some approaches that come about when symptoms of depression are more pronounced and highly impactful.